It is dancing in the kitchen even when there is no music. Last week, Thomas came home from school and found me in the garden, finally attempting to plant something after years of neglect. He sat down beside me in the dirt, not caring that his work clothes were getting ruined. "What are you planting?" he asked. "Lavender," I said. "I read that it represents devotion." He smiled and picked up a spare trowel. "Let me help." We worked side by side in the fading afternoon light, our hands dirty, our knees aching, planting something that would take time to grow but would be beautiful when it did. That night, as we lay in bed, Thomas reached for my hand in the darkness. "Olivia?" "Yeah, I am glad we stayed." I squeezed his hand. "Me too." And I meant it. With every broken, repaired, still healing part of me, I meant it.
The end. Moral.
Love is not just found. It is also built, rebuilt, and sometimes painstakingly restored. A successful marriage does not mean never facing hardship or distance, but rather choosing to bridge that distance with honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to try again. True commitment means staying curious about your partner, grieving together instead of apart, and understanding that the hardest choice is often the most worthwhile. In a world that often celebrates easy exits, there is profound strength in choosing to stay and do the work of loving someone, again and again. But we were not fine. Losing the possibility of children created a silence between us that we never learned how to fill. Thomas threw himself into teaching, into his students, into every committee and project the school offered. I threw myself into work, into books, into long walks alone through the neighborhood. We became roommates who shared a mortgage and a last name, but little else. It was a Thursday evening in late November when I decided I could not do it anymore. Thomas was at the dining table grading papers, his red pen moving mechanically across student essays. I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch television, but really just staring at the wall. "Thomas," I said quietly. He did not look up. When was the last time we had a real conversation?" His pen stopped moving. He looked at me confused. "We talk every day."
"No," I said.
"We exchange information. You tell me about your day. I tell you about mine. But when was the last time we really talked? When was the last time we talked about us?" He put the pen down slowly. "Where is this coming from?" "From 17 years of feeling invisible," I said, and my voice cracked despite my efforts to stay calm. "From living in the same house as you, but feeling completely alone." Thomas stared at me, and I saw something in his face I had not seen in years. Not anger, not defensiveness, just sadness. Deep, tired sadness. "I do not know how to fix this, Olivia," he said quietly. "I do not even know when it broke." That was the moment I realized he felt it too. The distance, the emptiness, the slow death of what we once had. And somehow, knowing that he felt it too made it worse. The next morning, I called my older sister, Margaret. She lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 teenage daughters. Her life always seemed perfect to me, the kind of life I thought I would have. Happy marriage, beautiful kids, a house full of noise and love. "I think I am going to leave Thomas," I told her. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Olivia," she said finally, her voice careful. "Are you sure? I mean, is there someone else? Did something happen?" "No," I said. "Nothing happened. That is the problem. Nothing has happened between us in years. We are just existing. And I cannot do it anymore." Margaret sighed. "Marriage is hard-lived. Everyone goes through rough patches. You cannot just give up because things are not perfect." "This is not a rough patch," I said, feeling frustration rise in my chest. "This is our life. This is how it has been for years. I am not giving up on a hard moment. I am walking away from something that is already over." She did not understand.
How could she?
Her marriage was alive. Mine was a ghost. I did not leave that day, or the next, or the week after. Leaving a marriage, I discovered, is not something you do impulsively. It requires planning, courage, and a kind of grief I was not prepared for. Instead, Thomas and I started going to therapy. It was his idea, actually. He came home one evening with the name of a counselor, a woman named Dr. Callahan, who specialized in couples therapy. "I do not want to lose you," he said, and there were tears in his eyes. Real tears. I had not seen Thomas cry in over a decade. So I agreed. Dr. Callahan's office was in a converted house downtown, warm and filled with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that were too easy to sink into. She was in her 60s, with kind eyes and a directness that I appreciated. Our first session was brutal. She asked us to describe our marriage, and Thomas spoke first. He talked about how we met in college, how I was the smartest person in his literature class, how he fell in love with the way I argued about books with a passion that made everyone else in the room disappear. Then it was my turn. I talked about the early years, the laughter, the late-night conversations, the way we used to dance in the kitchen to songs on the radio. I talked about how much I loved him. Past tense. Dr. Callahan listened, without interrupting. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "When did you stop being curious about each other?" Neither of us had an answer. Over the next few months, therapy became our routine. Every Tuesday evening, we sat in those two comfortable chairs and peeled back layers of resentment, disappointment, and pain we had been covering up for years. We talked about the children we never had and how that loss had created a hole we tried to ignore instead of grieve together. We talked about how Thomas used his students as a replacement for the family he wanted, and how I used my solitude as a shield against the intimacy I was afraid to ask for. We talked about the affair I almost had 3 years ago with a coworker named Ben. Nothing physical happened, but there were emails, late-night conversations, an emotional connection that crossed a line. I confessed it in therapy, and Thomas sat there, silent, absorbing the betrayal. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I was ashamed," I said. "And because I did not think you would care." That hurt him more than the betrayal itself. The idea that I believed he would not care. But here's the thing about therapy, about really doing the work. It does not just reveal problems. It reveals whether or not you still want to solve them. And slowly, painfully, honestly, we realized we did. It was a cold Saturday in February. Thomas and I decided to do something we had not done in years. We went on a date. Not a dinner out of obligation or a movie to fill time. A real date. Thomas planned it. He would not tell me where we were going, just told me to dress warm and be ready by 6. He drove us to the coast, about an hour and a half from Portland. The sun was setting when we arrived, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that looked almost unreal. The beach was empty except for a few seagulls and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Thomas pulled a blanket from the trunk of the car and spread it on the sand. He had brought a thermos of hot chocolate and a bag of pastries from my favorite bakery. We sat there, wrapped in the blanket, watching the ocean. "I have been thinking," Thomas said after a while, "about what Dr. Callahan said. About curiosity." I looked at him. "I want to know you again, Olivia," he said. "Not the version of you I think I know. The real you.
The person you are right now.
I want to ask questions. I want to listen. I want to be curious again." I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking. Opening. "I want that too," I whispered.
He reached for my hand.
His fingers were cold, but his grip was steady. "Tell me something I do not know about you," he said. I thought for a moment. "I have been writing poetry. For the past 2 years. I have never shown it to anyone." He smiled. "Will you show me?" "Maybe," I said, smiling back. "Someday." We stayed on that beach until the sky turned dark and the stars began to appear. We talked about everything and nothing. We talked about our fears, our regrets, the dreams we had abandoned, and the ones we still carried quietly. For the first time in years, I felt like I was sitting next to my husband. Not a stranger. Not a roommate. My husband. Rebuilding a marriage is not like building something new. It is like restoring something old and damaged. You cannot just cover up the cracks. You have to examine them, understand how they formed, and carefully, patiently repair them. Thomas and I started small. We established a rule. No phones during dinner. We ate together every night and talked. Really talked. Some nights the conversation was light and easy. Other nights it was hard and uncomfortable. But we showed up. Every single night, we showed up. We started going for walks in the evening, something we used to do when we first got married. We walked through our neighborhood, holding hands, noticing things we had stopped seeing. The old oak tree at the corner of Maple Street, the house with the wind chimes that played a soft melody whenever the breeze picked up, the way the streetlights made everything look softer. We rediscovered each other's rhythms. I learned that Thomas had started listening to jazz, something he never liked before. He learned that I had become obsessed with birdwatching, that I could identify a dozen different species just by their calls. We went back to the coast several times. It became our place, the spot where we were learning how to be married again. One evening, about 6 months into therapy, Dr. Callahan asked us a question that felt like a test. If you could go back and change one thing about your marriage, what would it be? Thomas answered first. I would have grieved with you, he said, looking at me. When we lost the possibility of having children, I shut down. I ran away into work because I did not know how to handle the pain. I should have stayed. I should have cried with you. I should have let us be broken together instead of separately. I felt tears slide down my face. Then it was my turn. I would have told you I was lonely, I said. Instead of punishing you with silence. I would have asked for what I needed instead of resenting you for not reading my mind. Dr. Callahan nodded slowly. You cannot change the past, but you can honor it by doing things differently now. And that is what we did. It was not perfect. There were setbacks. There were nights when old patterns crept back in, when Thomas stayed too late at school, when I retreated into silence. But the difference now was that we noticed. We caught ourselves. We apologized. We tried again. 1 year after that first session with Dr. Callahan, Thomas and I renewed our vows. Not in a church or in front of a crowd. Just the two of us, standing on the same beach where we had our first real conversation in years. We wrote our own vows this time. Mine were simple. I promise to stay curious about you. I promise to tell you when I am hurting instead of hiding it. I promise to choose you, every day, even on the days when it is hard. Thomas's vows made me cry. I promise to see you. Not the idea of you. Not the version of you I want you to be, but the real you. I promise to make space for your sadness, your joy, your anger, all of it. I promise to love you not in spite of our brokenness, but because of what we have built from it. We exchanged new rings. Not expensive ones. Simple silver bands we picked out together at a small jewelry shop downtown. They were engraved with a single word, again. Because that is what we were doing. We were choosing each other again. My sister Margaret came to visit a few months later. She sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and watching Thomas and me move around each other with an ease that had taken years to rebuild. You look different, she said. Different how? I asked. Happy, she said simply. You look happy. I smiled. I am. She shook her head in wonder. I really thought you were going to leave him. I did too, I admitted. But I realized something. Leaving would have been easier. Staying and doing the work, that was the harder choice. And sometimes the harder choice is the right one. Thomas and I are not perfect. Our marriage is not perfect. We still have hard days. We still disagree. We still hurt each other sometimes without meaning to, but we have learned how to repair. We have learned that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make over and over again. It is showing up even when you do not feel like it. It is being curious when it would be easier to assume. It is apologizing when you are wrong and forgiving when you are hurt. It is dancing in the kitchen even when there is no music. Last week, Thomas came home from school and found me in the garden, finally attempting to plant something after years of neglect. He sat down beside me in the dirt, not caring that his work clothes were getting ruined. What are you planting? He asked. Lavender, I said. I read that it represents devotion. He smiled and picked up a spare trowel. Let me help. We worked side by side in the fading afternoon light, our hands dirty, our knees aching, planting something that would take time to grow but would be beautiful when it did. That night, as we lay in bed, Thomas reached for my hand in the darkness. Olivia? Yeah, I am glad we stayed. I squeezed his hand. Me too. And I meant it. With every broken, repaired, still healing part of me, I meant it.
The end. Moral.
Love is not just found, it is also built, rebuilt, and sometimes painstakingly restored. A successful marriage does not mean never facing hardship or distance, but rather choosing to bridge that distance with honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to try again. True commitment means staying curious about your partner, grieving together instead of apart, and understanding that the hardest choice is often the most worthwhile. In a world that often celebrates easy exits, there is profound strength in choosing to stay and do the work of loving someone again and again.